Okay, today we have a heads up sit and go video where I will not be looking at my cards once in each of two matches. And these are two recent PokerStars matches I played at the $11 level. And basically what we're going to be looking to do is see the importance of aggression in heads up. And the idea that I'm trying to show you guys is not that playing without your cards is going to be the highest EV approach, but that if you play a really aggressive style, you can do surprisingly well even if you're not playing your cards as much. So what my goal is going to be is to make a lot of raises before the flop, and then to c-bet into the flop, usually around 2/3 the pot, and that's going to win a lot. So now I'm raising to 75, and that's a bit under 2/3 the pot, and that's going to usually take it because I'm representing the ace, and if New York Honda doesn't have it, it's going to be hard for him to call. So betting more like 100, 120 there is a bit unnecessary. So Honda limps, I'm going to bump it up to 4 blinds, and that's going to take it a lot before the flop, and when it doesn't, I'll just throw in a c-bet after the flop of around 120 into a 160 pot. So I'll vary the size of my pre-flop raises a little, and we see that Honda is capable of folding to a 2.5 times raise, which is good. And what'll be difficult here, so you're going to check or make a small bet here. If he checks behind, I'll certainly bet the turn, and a standard bet here of about 30. What's going to be difficult, nice, we take it without, I love this, is going to be the late streets, playing the turn in the river. And there's going to be a little guesswork there, but we'll just see what happens. And really the key thing I want you guys to get out of this is that heads up, particularly heads up tournament play, is just largely a game of aggression, whichever player is the most aggressive, and I'm just going to try to really out-aggress this guy and come in strong. Okay, this is kind of a raggedy flop, and I'm going to throw in sort of a weird looking bet, hopefully to scare him. Nice. Takes it down. Very few hands, only 5 cards connect with a flop that comes paired like 9-9-3. And when he doesn't have it, because I showed strength before and after the flop, it's going to be hard for him to do much there besides fold. Okay, here I'm getting 2-1 in position, and so I'm going to make the call, and if he checks once or twice, I can probably take this away from him, and if he comes out betting, like he does there, I'll just fold. And that's a pretty bad bet on his part with most hands, because again he's offering me 2-1 in position. Even if he has a hand like pocket aces, he should bump it up more. Okay, that's not a huge pot. We're playing about 75 big blinds deep, and he should really increase the size of the pot early, particularly out of position, even if he has a very strong hand there. So he can't do much here. I just pose a little and let him have it. He probably really has a hand here if he's betting into a 3-diamond queen high board. A loose aggressive player could do that with a lot of hands, but I think this particular guy is doing that to protect a decent queen, or unlikely, but theoretically possible, a low flush. So here I'm coming in for a min raise, and when he checks, I'll see bet 2/3, 3/4 of the pot, which is pretty standard. Now he's offering me 3-1, which is kind of interesting here, and it's sort of a drawy board. So we've got two approaches. We could either fold this and move on to the next hand, or we could call, and if he does not follow up on the turn, make a bet there. So I'm going to play a little cautious and just fold right then. But those are pretty good odds in position. And another thing also is really just evaluating the situation, and the cards, they can be sort of distracting, because of course they're important, but you don't always want to think about cards. A lot of times what's more important is will a bet take the pot here? What is my opponent likely to have? And what I'm thinking of doing here is making a small bet, and the reason I like a small bet is I can see what he has if he shows down. So yeah, there he had the 9. Obviously he's not folding a straight, Occasionally they're fold, and basically it's a way to get a cheap showdown in a big pot where I don't want to have to just fold, which I would otherwise. Okay, now again I'm getting 2 to 1 in position, and if he doesn't bet to represent the ace, I will. And now there's not. Okay, this is kind of a debate. I don't know. If he checks here, I'll definitely make a follow-up bet. I think that flop card is a little marginal. But basically what I'm doing there is trying to use position as a weapon to take it away from him on a later street. I think this guy, though, is fairly literal. He's not a terrible player or anything. But he's fairly literal, and I think he's doing that. I don't think he's going to make a double bluff after the flop. It's just not something a lot of players would do, except for the really loose aggressive guys. Okay, this flop is pretty unlikely to have connected with him. He was willing to call or raise before the flop, and it's just very unlikely that he's got a 9. Also, I've c-bet every time, so if he did have a piece, why wouldn't he check raise me here? And I really don't think he has much, so I'm just going to go ahead and raise. If he comes over top, it's his, but I think there's a very good chance. It's kind of strange that that he wouldn't check that, because I've been c-betting just about every time, but most likely there he had top pair and just wanted to protect it. So good play by him, and he ends up winning a much larger pot because of that. Okay, there I check with the idea of firing at the turn, and you have to fire either the flop or the turn. And now I'm just making a tiny bet to again try to show down cheap and see what he has. Wow, and he takes it. So he's getting about 20 to 1 there in folds. Most likely he had a straight draw that missed. And again, the reason I made that bet was just because I wanted to see a cheap showdown, see what he had, and my hand could be best, with the random distribution. I really wasn't expecting him to fold there, but that works as well. And now our decimated stack is back up a little. He only has like a 2 to 1 chip lead on us. And maybe do we have a diamond? No. Okay. Sngman101 has high card ace, so he probably doesn't know what the hell we're doing here. But that's cool. Okay, folds to min raise, which is nice. And what would really be good is if we could get this up to 50, 100, because then it's really more of a pre-flop all-in game, and of course in Holdem, no hand is really going to be that big an underdog to another hand. Again, in general, the worst case scenario is that you're 2 to 1 underdog with 2 undercards, so 2 overcards. And that's not so bad for a pre-flop all-in gamble. So 50, 100 would be probably the best way to play this style. And now when he checks again, we've got a bet. We'll just bet 3/4 the pot. And that takes it. If he had a 9 or a 7, he would very likely bet there. And after that, it's pretty safe to go ahead and bet. And of course, if he had come over top or called, that would have been in. And there he's offering us 4 to 1 odds before the flop. So that's a definite call. If we had seen our hand, the only thing we might do would have been to re-raise, but we certainly would have at least called. This is kind of a weird spot. Board of 8-10 jack. We're going to peel a card off and hope that we can take it at the turn. If he comes in with an all-in or something, it'll be his. But I don't think... I'm just going to go for it here. This is just the idea that hopefully raw aggression will work. And his bet doesn't make a lot of sense with too many hands. He can't... Nice. Okay, he folds. It's a pretty small bet. There are 2 hearts out there. There's a straight draw. And I think if he had it, he would have made a larger bet. So I thought there was a very good chance that he would fold immediately. The pot was large. And we also could have had a hand. So, works out well. And basically, we're just going to have to choose spots where he could fold, be it at the flop or on one of the later streets, and come in with a big bet. We can't be calling a lot when we don't know our cards, obviously. So anytime that we think we have a good amount of fold equity, the pot's pretty large and there's a good chance you'll fold, then we're going to be very likely to come in with a big re-raise and try to win immediately. So now we're continuing our style, and another paired flop, which is very unlikely to hit your opponent from a probability standpoint. You know, what does he have here? A 10, a 6, it's unlikely, so I come with a weird looking bet. And sometimes those appear kind of scary when your opponent bets some dumb looking number like 61 or whatever. You don't know what he has. So you don't want to do that all the time, but I'll do that to mix it up a little. And now limping during 25-50 is something you want to do pretty sparingly. I'm going to attack this. I would do that with a lot of hands, even seeing my cards. And getting worse than 3-2, we obviously can't call this. We'll just pose a little. But he could have a lot of hands here. He could just be tired of me attacking his limps and be doing it with kind of random hand. He could be still playing a big hand. He could have a hand like pocket sixes, and it's more of a spur of the moment thing. So pretty tough to tell. Now we're 25-50, about even stacked. Each of us about 30 blinds deep. And, you know, I could definitely attack this, or I could just check. So he's won a little respect from me here. I just check it, and I'm going to bet out here. And I'll do that with a lot of hands. And we'll fold that, because even for a head, he could have a draw to a much better hand, or it's kind of a strange play. I don't think that's a very good time to come back over top randomly, but you certainly could, and he might fold a hand like bottom pair if you did that. Okay, coming in for a min raise, we could call, getting 3-1. And we certainly win in position. Out of position, we'll just call that. And it's 3 minutes until 50-100. So hopefully we can make it to that point and turn it into a game of pre-flop all-in. Okay, after he calls the flop, I would have bet the turn if it had been an overcard, but he's saying he liked the flop, and not much has changed, so it's his pot. Okay, he comes in for 3 times raise. We could 3-bet him here. It's a little awkward. If he calls, then we'd probably just shove the flop. If he immediately reshoved all in, it'd be pretty tough because we'd be getting good odds. But it'd be tough. Okay, we'll definitely c-bet here. This is one that's pretty unlikely. Again, he's leading out. That's pretty unexpected. I think I'm just going to come over top, and the pot's pretty big. There are a lot of hands he could fold. And now he's called. Okay. So I'm getting about 4-1 here. The pot was about 1,500 before the bet. So now it's like 2,500 to call. I'm pretty priced in. It's kind of hard to call with the random distribution. We could be ahead. We are getting about 4-1. I'm going to call this. This is probably not the smartest play. Okay, he's got a 9 with an overcard spade kicker. Oops. And okay, so that one didn't work out super well. So now we'll try another. But I think that was probably a pretty dumb call on my part in the last hand. I mean, would have been pretty much blinded out otherwise. But I don't think the random distribution has enough equity to make that call. Again, so it's likely to be a pretty strong hand. So, one thing though is that I think I may have misplayed a couple of hands there, but we did make it to 25, late stages of 25-50, and took the chip lead a few times just by playing really aggressively. And hopefully now I've picked up a few tips and I'll have better chances against this guy. Amsterdam. Okay, I've got to readjust the software so I can't see. And normally I come over top with Queen King or release call, but that's a penalty. I could see my card, so I'll have to fold. Yeah, that's certainly going to be one aspect where this type of approach is the weakest on the later streets when your cards obviously are very important and you're making a decision for a lot of chips. So hopefully now we can avoid that a little more and stick to mainly pre-flop and flop betting. Okay, I'm going to 3-bet him here. He's come in for consecutive raises, and I'm going to come in with a standard C-bet of between half and 2/3 of the pot. So I'll just make it some random number about just over half the pot, and it takes it. And based on around 5 hands so far, this guy looks like he's a little more aggressive, and that could actually help us out, because if he wants to play a game of raise re-raise, then that's exactly what not being able to see your cards is meant for. Just gambling it up. And we can't call, even getting around 3-1 there. So we're going to try the same style. And one thing that we definitely learned from the last game is getting involved in big pots that are pretty much committed and it's late in the hand isn't a good idea. So I'm definitely going to modify the style and really go for a pre-flop and flop game. Okay, I'm 3-betting him here again, and that's something that I'm very happy to do with this style. Make a standard C-bet. And I think the ace is very unlikely. This is a card that's very good to bluff. Okay, we have a very large pot, and I am going to bluff this because if he's on any kind of draw, this is going to be a very hard bet for him to call, even if he had top pair. Now I'm putting it to him for all of his chips. And nice. Okay, awesome. He folds. And we pull off to a 2-1 chip lead. And that would be a type of bluff that wouldn't be wise to make. And now he's pissed. Wouldn't it be wise to make if the flush card had hit, or if a blank had fallen, because he's really saying he likes his hand at the flop. But when the pot's that big and an overcard hits, so now it's very possible that our sequence of actions was very consistent with having an ace. And when you combine the fact that he could very well fold because of that, with the fact that the pot was about equal to our effective stacks, I think that's a pretty good bluffing opportunity. Okay, now we're getting 3-1 in position. We could either fold or call and try to take it away at the turn. I'm going to go with that approach. If he checks, I'm going to bet this. And I'll come in for about half the pot. It might be a bit low. It's, well, probably for the best. Normally about 125, 150 is a bit better there. And he most likely had hit his queen. Or maybe a kind of a random 2-pair. Okay, so we'll continue and come in for another 3-blind raise. And Amsterdam is playing a fairly loose-aggressive style and seems to be a decent player. And we'll see what his limps mean. Okay, so we attack his button limp and he folds, which is good. We'll come in for a smaller raise. If he checks this, there's no need to make a big bet. And you could even check here and bet the turn. He might find that suspicious. I'm just going to come with a very small bet. And it's going to look kind of suspicious. And most likely, if he doesn't have the ace or the king, he's going to fold to pretty much any bet. And otherwise, it's going to be very tough to get him out of the pot. So you wouldn't want to bet more than around half the pot if you're bluffing on that ace-king-deuce flop. Okay, he checks, and I'll just bet like 3/4 of the pot. And takes it, which is nice. And once again, we're not necessarily playing the best poker ever, but we're absolutely hanging with this guy without seeing our cards, just by essentially hitting the raise button just about every hand. And fair continuation bets, taking constant stabs. And yeah. Okay, here I'm going to take a card off and I'm going to try to take it away from him if he checks. But now his forward or straight are on board. So, and there's a flush draw. So if we make a C bet there, I think based on the last, this one I'm tempted to call just because I'm very curious to know what he has, and it's possible that we can beat a bluff. We're getting very good odds. I am pretty curious to know what hand he has where he's doing this. A 10 doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay, so yeah, he actually flopped a straight there. And I think it had not been for the first game, I would have fired again on the turn when that 7 came. But the problem with that is that then again, if he had stayed in the pot, either by calling or re-raising, we would have been in a situation like when we lost the last game, where we're in the late streets with a real big pot, with possibly a best hand, and it's real hard to fold. When you weigh the best hand, you're getting great pot odds. So we kind of used that lesson there, and lesson for playing in the dark, that is, and did not fire a follow-up bullet, which worked out well. And it's kind of interesting that he checked the turn there with the nuts and the flush draw. But it's a decent play to extract value, particularly because we've been playing a very aggressive style and could very easily have bet there. So I think he played that pretty well. Getting 3-1, we're going to call this before the flop. And now I don't think I can continue here. And that's a pretty good bet if he's missed it, because it's going to be really hard for me to call with an ace and a king on board. If I've got a hand, like even a mid-pocket pair, it'd be very tough to call there. Okay, this hand he's coming in for a lot of 3 blind raises, and I'm going to come in and bump it up for a 3-bet here, and hope to either win immediately or now take it at the flop. And I'm going to check and actually bet the turn and hope that that works out. And that's kind of a variation. Usually you just c-bet immediately, but sometimes, particularly if you think your opponent is maybe thinking a little, you'll just wait. Okay, and now we're screwed. Delay the flop and fire out at the turn instead. And we can't continue in this hand despite the odds. It's kind of strange, though, that he would make this sequence of plays in the min-raise here, because it's kind of a dangerous spot to slow play. And I'd be very curious to know what he had there. But now we're just continue with your style of trying to chip away. But yeah, after I had 3-bet before the flop and he had called, you pretty much, normally you just fire immediately when you're out of position like that. That's a pretty stupid bet on his part with most hands. You either fire immediately or you wait until the turn, and normally you just bet out. But there I decided to wait until the turn, and most likely he had either king or monster hand or a total bluff. That was just randomly going over us. Okay, another hand that we certainly can't play is coming all in before the flop, lines of 15-30. Okay, he checks. Continuation bet. A bit on the small side. And I'm thinking I'm just going to go all in here. And this is another spot where we have pretty good fold equity, because the pot's big. And okay, I apologize for that. I'm going to rewind this for just a second. This is a replay of the initial. And in that situation, the pot is big. The pot is close to the effective stacks, and it's pretty unlikely that he's going to be able to call. Okay, sorry about that. But anyway, the fold equity there is huge, and the fact that we can be the raiser there is absolutely key. So we'll look at this hand again, and there are definitely hands that have a speed, but when he could certainly fold, and when he does, we win a pot close to the effective stack size. That's a great time when you're playing a game of 100% aggression, rather than our cards, obviously, to make a re-raise. And it works out there, and most likely he was on a missed straight draw or had one of the lower pairs. And if you've got even a pair of nines there, it's very tough to continue when there's a flush possibility and your opponent's showing that kind of strength. Wow. Okay, another situation when that guy folds, getting close to 10-1, and that was a min bet just designed to show down and see what he had. And even when you make very small bets like that, blocking bet, it can be very tough for the guy to raise without a hand, even if his hand is fairly strong, because you're the one who's taking the initiative, and it might look strong to him. And it takes a player who's really keen on playing the pot size that he wants to make a raise there without a very strong hand, even if you've set a river price that's extremely low for the quality of hand that he has, unless he has a really strong hand. Okay, I'll try limping, just to kind of mix in my play. Another paired flop, one you definitely want to bet, and just takes it. And after our nicely successful aggressive play of a few hands ago, we've pulled up almost back to a tie with Amsterdam. And we'll try to play our same game here. Okay, he raises to 250, and I'm going to come over top of this. And it works. Okay. And again, I've been c-betting a lot, so it's kind of strange that he would lead out there. And it was a big pot, and he was very possible that he would fold immediately. And when he does, we win a very large pot, and so we have a lot of fold equity there. And if not, who knows? Could have had a real hand. But that worked out well. Okay, this is another time when you do not want to make a bet of 300 or 400. You want to make a bet on the smaller side, probably not more than half the pot, because you'll have a lot of difficulty calling without an ace or king. This is a low on the small side, and now I'm going to be done with the hand here. I'm not going to put myself in a position where I've got to play for all my chips or something. And now I'm just going to try to see what he has by making another small price-setting bet. And we take it! Okay, with a pair of kings. Sngman101 is a pair of kings. So, great. And that also shows that when you're playing the random distribution, you're semi-bluffing. You don't know what you have, you could always improve to a better hand, and you could always theoretically have the best hand. So the blocking bet worked out very well. And in 2 minutes we get to 50, 100. Should be nice. Okay, I'll try another limp. He hasn't been attacking those a lot. If he checks, I will make a pretty standard stab at this pot. And I would do this seeing my cards with a lot of hands, whether I hit it or whether I hadn't. So pretty straightforward. And he bets, I think I'm going to 3-bet this. And I'm just going to come in. This is a pretty standard raise for him. Wow, okay. Now, the reason that we've got to call that immediately is no matter, wow, and he's got kings. But we're getting the pot odds. We're getting, I believe, close to 4-1 there on that call. And no matter what hand he has, and no matter what hand we have, we're getting the odds to do that. Even if we knew that he had pocket kings, with a random distribution, I don't think we're more than a 4-1 dog. And against any likely range, we're certainly not going to be more than a 4-1 dog. And that was a situation when he certainly, he was raising pre-flop pretty often, and we got called out there. So maybe we'll suck out on him. And yes, okay. So we take it, and I don't know quite what we had there. Let's see, we can look up in the hand history. But this is great. So we have won the tournament, and we had a flush. Sngman 101. So it's ace of diamonds, 8 of diamonds. So that would actually have been a good time to 3-bet. If I had known that I had had a mid-suited ace, I probably would have 3-bet anyway. So it turned out not to matter as much in that hand. And awesome. So we win the tournament without looking at our hand once, just through raw aggression. So Sngman101 signing off.